Hey, welcome here to the Blue Butterfly. We are gathering online. No physical gathering this Sunday morning. We've had some unforeseen circumstances, but aren't you grateful for technology? We can still do this, and it's always my privilege to be here speaking to you guys. I hope you're all settled in. Hope you're ready for what I have to share with you over the next few moments. But before we get into that, let me just pray for us. I thank you, God, for this moment, and I pray that it would not be wasted. Would you use these next few minutes and may they be the highlight of our week? May you use them to speak to us, to touch our hearts, and to give us a picture of the beautiful life you have called us to live. I pray that in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen. When I was a teenager, whenever I messed up, my dad would say something along the lines like this. He'd look at me and go, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. And something inside of him would go, oh, no, not disappointed, not disappointed. Be angry, flip a table over, scream and shout at me, do something, break a glass or whatever. Vent your frustration, vent your anger, but not disappointment. Don't be disappointed in me. I think there is something inside each and every one of us that absolutely hates disappointing those that we truly and dearly love. We hate disappointing other people, especially the ones closest to us. Now, when I was about 19 years old, I made one of the worst decisions of my life. I had a really bad day. I did something absolutely shocking. So shocking that I'm embarrassed to tell you what it is. So I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I'll tell you the impact it had on me. It really hurt a lot of people. It hurt the people closest to me, the people who loved me the most. And it also led to the physical hurt of someone else. One of my best friends ended up in hospital because of a decision that I made. And it was the worst day of my life. I remember going through the day and there was just sort of this numbness and this disbelief, and it was just crazy. But what stuck with me was the next morning when I woke up and everything was silent. And the previous day, the horror day, was over. I woke up and I felt different to how I feel in other mornings. And I remember getting up and going to the bathroom and looking into the mirror and just staring into my own eyes in the mirror. And I just started crying. And it wasn't tears because of what had happened, it wasn't tears of the results of what my decision was. It was tears of disappointment. It was tears of anger. It was tears of frustration. I was so angry and so disappointed in myself. I couldn't believe that I did what I did. I was absolutely disgusted by the person that I saw in the mirror. And I just couldn't shake that feeling of disappointment and disbelief to how low I could have fallen and how I could have become this person that was staring back at me at the mirror. You see, it's one thing to disappoint those ones that we love. And maybe if you're religious, it's also, it's another thing to feel that you have disappointed God and you've disgusted God. But it's quite another thing. There's another sadness, a deeper level of sadness when you disappoint yourself. When you don't even meet the standards you have set for yourself. Never mind the standards that others have set for you. When you look at your life and you look at your decisions and you look at yourself, you look in the mirror and you are absolutely disgusted by what you see. Absolutely disappointed. See, maybe this is the story of your life. It's not that it's just one event, something you did, some bad decision that led to you looking in the mirror where you were absolutely disappointed in yourself. But maybe your whole life is a big disappointment. Maybe as you look back at everything you've done, and your experience of life is that to yourself, not even to mention to other people, but to yourself, you are one major letdown, one major disappointment. You know that you will always be the one that messes things up for everyone else. You are always going to be the one that finds a way that leads to destruction and chaos. You know that you are the one that disappoints everyone. You are the one that holds everyone back, that holds the team back, that holds the class back, that holds the room back. And inside you know and you feel that everyone else would be better off without you. And the thing is, you wouldn't even be angry if they rejected you. You wouldn't even be angry if God rejected you because you reject you. I was watching this movie once about this young boy, a teenage boy, and he engaged in these live interaction role play games where it's a lot of people, they come together in a park and they actually reenact the medieval times. And so they dressed like the people in the medieval times and had the swords. They spoke like those people in those days, and they would have these wars, and there would be knights, and there'd be castles, and there'd be maidens, and there'd be magicians, and there'd be, all kinds of things. And this young teenager is way into this, and he lives in it, and his parents are concerned that he lives in a fantasy world. And eventually he's given this mentor, an adult that's supposed to mentor him, and they're having this conversation, and his mentor says to him, he says, but this world, this medieval world, it's fake. It's not a real world. And he looks at his mentor and he goes, yeah, I know that. But at least in this world, I don't have to be myself. And maybe you're the kind of person, you crave for a world that you don't have to be yourself. You crave for a world where you could just be normal, where you could just be like everyone else and you don't just destroy everything everywhere you go. But it seems like you have a gift, or should we say you have a curse, that you always seem to find a way to self-destruct. You always seem to find a way to destroy things and mess things up for everyone. You know what it looks like and feels like to be staring into the mirror and to feel this disappointment in the person that you're looking into. Now in Matthew chapter 5, in verse 4, Jesus says the following to his disciples. He says, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Now, our initial assumption is when Jesus says, blessed are those who mourn, he is speaking about people who mourn about things that have happened to them in life, tragedies that have struck them. And so they have lost a loved one, they've lost an opportunity, they've lost their health, they've lost their business, they've lost something dear to them, and they are experiencing profound loss. And so they are mourning, they are grieving about what has happened to them. And that verse certainly includes that, but it's not primarily what it is speaking about. When Jesus is saying, blessed are those who mourn, he's saying, blessed are those who look at themselves and they mourn and they grieve. Blessed are those people who are able to see their own lives in a way that brings them to tears. When they look at their own actions and they look at their own behavior, it just brings up this sadness, this grief, this mourning, this disappointment in who they are and how they behave. So Jesus says, if you are the person that stares into the mirror and all that comes up from within you is great disappointment and sadness and grief, and an absolute reaction of seeing something that is pathetic and vile and disappointing and disgusting, well, then Jesus said, well, guess what? Blessed are those who mourn. You are then in the space of being blessed. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. So why are these who mourn blessed? Well, Jesus says, because they will be comforted. It's these mourners who actually experience divine comfort coming to them. I have this friend, and he tells the story of when he was in year 9. He says during the year he didn't really work too hard, he didn't study enough, and he had this sense that at the end of the year that he didn't do enough to pass year 9. And so they went on holiday, him and his family, they went down to the coast. But he said during that time when they were there on holiday, there was this nagging thought that when they went back home, his report card for the year would be waiting. And he had this feeling that he didn't do enough to pass year 9. And so he was plagued by this nagging thought the whole time while they were on holiday. And when the holiday was over, they packed everything up and they were back in the car and they drove back home. He says when they drove into the driveway, the car didn't even stop, and he opened the door and he ran to the mailbox and he found the envelope with his school logo on it. And he ran into the house and he opened it up, and his worst nightmare was confirmed. It said that he had failed year 9, and he just stood there in absolute disbelief. And he could feel the tears welling up in his eyes. He says, and as he looked up, his dad walked into the room, still carrying some of the luggage from their holiday. And his dad looked up at him and he said, "What's wrong?" And he looked at his dad and he said, "I just failed year 9. He says, and his dad didn't say a word. Put the luggage down. He went across to him. He stood alongside his son. He put his arm around him and he just gave him a hug. He just held him. Just gave him a hug. And my friend says that is one of the most powerful things his dad ever did in the relationship. That hug communicated way more than words could. It was a hug that transcended what was happening to him in the moment. See, Jesus says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." What Jesus is saying is, God knows when you need a hug, because God knows when you are fragile. See, when you are fragile in a relationship with another person, their actions are very powerful. I remember me and Karina, we had disappointed some friends one time, and after a while we felt we needed to go back and apologize to them because we felt we were wrong. And so we went into that space of vulnerability. We became fragile in front of them, and we communicated to them that we were sorry because of what happened and it was our fault, and we really asked for their forgiveness. But the hug never came. We needed the hug. They said they forgave us, but you know when someone says something but their body language communicates something else? We were fragile. And we felt bad about what we did, but the hug never came. You know what? We're not friends anymore. We never see those people anymore. See, when you are fragile, the actions of the other person is very powerful. See, when my friend stood there in that moment and his eyes were welling up with tears, he knew he had no one else to blame. He was angry. He wanted to punch someone, but the person he wanted to punch was himself. He was angry at himself. He was disappointed in himself. He was disgusted in himself. And what he found in that moment is his dad knew he needed a hug. Just gave him a hug. And so much was communicated in that hug. That was the hug of understanding. That was the hug of compassion. That was the hug of forgiveness. That was the hug that said to him, "Your pain is my pain." And that was the hug that communicated to him that you are not defined by your worst moments. You are my child. God knows when you need a hug. But secondly, God knows when to keep quiet. God knows when you don't need a speech. God knows when you don't need a lecture. Remember, I told you how I messed up and how I hurt those people closest to me? My dad would have been one of those people that I hurt. And my best friend got physically hurt, and it was just a nightmare. But my dad never said anything. My dad was very tender in those moments. He helped me sort everything out. He was very gentle in how he spoke to me and how he related to me. And months later, when I started feeling better and when I moved on, I said to my dad, I asked him, I said, why didn't you yell at me? Why didn't you say, I told you so? Why didn't you um, vent your frustration? And my dad said, he says, because I looked at you and I could see what you were going through. And I didn't need to say anything. You knew what you had done. Nothing that I could have said would have made it better, it would have just made it worse. It says, those who mourn when they look in the mirrors, those who grieve when they look in the mirrors, those who are disappointed and disgusted in themselves, they know. They know what they've done. And so love knows that you need a hug, but love also knows when to be quiet. Blessed are those who mourn and grieve when they look into the mirror, for they will be comforted. That's when God just comes alongside you in your worst moments, when you are disgusted by yourself, and He just puts an arm around you. He just hugs you. And you don't get a lecture. You don't get a speech. You get comfort. A few years ago, there was this advertisement on television. It was about preventing abuse. It was quite confronting. And the theme of this advertisement was children see, children do. And so what they would do is they would have these different scenes throughout these advertisements of adults doing stuff that we've come to expect adults to do. But then they have 5-year-old kids walking alongside them doing the exact same things. And so this advertisement starts off with this lady, probably in her 40s, walking around and she's smoking. She's walking around in the city and she's smoking. And then there's a 5-year-old girl walking behind her, also smoking. And as they go up the escalator, the camera shot pans to the hand of the 5-year-old that's on the handrail of the escalator with the cigarette sticking out of the 2 fingers like that. And then they get to the top, and the adult woman, throws the cigarette down on the floor, and she steps on it with her foot, and she walks on. And then the 5-year-old does the same and drops the cigarette, steps on, and just extinguishes it and walks on. And then it cuts to this man coming out of a bar, finishing off a beer, and then throwing it on the ground. And next to him is a 5-year-old boy doing exactly the same thing, finishing his beer and throwing it on the ground and then crossing the street. And then it cuts to this lady who's in a moment of road rage, and she's fighting with the driver of the vehicle next to her, and she's shouting and she's giving him signals. And then it cuts to the back where her child in the back is doing the exact same thing, and showing offensive hand signals and screaming and shouting. And then it cuts to this moment of racist behavior where a man shouts at an immigrant and says, "Go back to where you came from." And it cuts to the young boy standing next to him, the 5-year-old, with pure rage in his face, pointing and screaming at this immigrant. And then it cuts to this father, who's this husband who's abusing his wife, physically abusing, and he's holding his fist back and he's about to hit his wife. And next to him is his son, the 5-year-old, and he's also holding his face back. And then they show the face of the 5-year-old, and there's pure rage and anger. And they put that at the bottom. Children see, children do. And it's a campaign to stop abuse and violence. And when I watched this advertisement, it was quite confronting, I have to say. But what really struck me was that some of that behavior, it's not that it's acceptable, it's not that it's right, it's not that it shouldn't happen, but we come to sort of be okay at a certain level when we see that kind of behavior in adults. But for me to see that behavior in a 5-year-old, that shook me. That bugged me. For days I was thinking about that. That, you can kind of see that in an adult and you go, oh, they're a bad person. But to see it in a 5-year-old, there's something that's stirred on the inside. That's something that reacts. It goes, that's not right. That's not right. That shouldn't be. A 5-year-old shouldn't be like that. But we expect to be okay when we see that in adults. Or we're more accepting of it when we see it in adults. Even though it's wrong, and even though it's evil, even it should be, never happen. See, I wonder if the 5-year-old version of you had to look at your life, how would they respond? If the 5-year-old version of you could have had a look at your last day, or your last week, your last month, your last year, your last decade, if they could look at your life, how would they respond? Would they be crying? Would there be tears of disappointment? Would there be tears of disgust? Would there be tears where they go, I can't believe I become that? See, Jesus is saying, blessed are those who mourn. I wonder if Jesus is saying, blessed are those who are able to see their own lives through the 5-year-old version of themselves. Because those tears come from a place of loss. They are the tears of the loss of their purity, loss of their innocence, and loss of their self-respect. And Jesus came, well, this is exactly what you should be doing. You should be trying to see your life through the eyes of the 5-year-old version of you. And when you cry as the 5-year-old version of yourself, as you mourn, as you're absolutely disgusted by what you see, offended by what you see, disappointed by what you see, Jesus is saying this is what you should be striving for. Because when you do that, you're in the space where you will be comforted. That's where you'll experience the divine hug. You will experience God throwing his arms around you. It's the hug of grace. It's the hug of a father that says, you are only now seeing what I've seen all along. Now you see why I have sent my son to die on a cross, to deal with the disappointment that even violates your view of yourself. This is why I sent my son Jesus, so he could wash you clean, so that I can give you this embrace and this hug. And so you experience when God is saying, hugging you in that moment, God is saying, I have already factored in your destruction before I called you to be in a relationship with me. I know you're bent towards chaos. I know how you are always the one that ends up messing everything up for yourself and for others. I know you're the one that always self-destructs. And I have factored that in. And I'm giving you this hug of grace. But you're also blessed, because then you're finally in this place where you have the motivation to change. Bill Hybels speaks about this in his leadership seminar of leading people from here to there. And he said he's always thought, he had it wrong way around. He always thought if you want to lead people to change, if you want to change them from this to that, or from this place to that place, from here to there, or from A to B, then you really need to make B attractive. You really need to tell people, hey, we are at A, but we should go to B. You should be at B. And you make B look, you go, B is awesome, B is fun, B is healthy, B is better for you, B is better for the environment, B is better for everyone. And he says, people got excited. Yeah, let's go to B. And then when they need to take the first few steps to go to B, no one would go with him. And it frustrated him. And he'd work harder to make B more attractive, he says, but then one day he flipped it around. He says he was driving past their church and it was in the middle of winter, and they had like this center where they gave food and clothing to homeless people. And it was in the middle of the winter, it was snowing, but their building was quite small, and so people had to queue outside. And as he drove to pick up some stuff there, he saw that these people who came for help were standing knee deep in snow. Some of them were children, they had no shoes on, but they were standing in snow waiting to get into the building to get some food and clothing. And it shocked him and it horrified him. So he got a photographer, the photographer came and he took photos. And then he went back to his community, to the church, and he says, I just want to show you something. And he started putting these photos up of all these children, all these people. And he says, I want to show you how we are treating our guests. These are people who come to us for help. And this is how we treat them. We let them stand outside for hours in the winter, in snow, with no shoes on, with no warm clothes, waiting for food. He says, and as these photos were going up, people were getting more and more and more comfortable. And it was like people wanted to say to him, please stop, we can't look at this anymore. We've got to change. He says, now, let me tell you a B. He says, and this is how you'd get people to change. You need to make them so uncomfortable at A. They have to look at A, they have to look at where they are, and they have to go, I cannot stand it to be in A anymore. I want to get out of here. He says, and then you can show them B. You see, when you mourn, when you look at your own life, when you mourn and are disgusted by your own behavior and by how you live your life, and you say, I cannot live by this way anymore, then you find the motivation to change, to live a new life. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. But they're also blessed because that becomes the fertile ground from which change will occur. So what next? What do you do with this? Engage in a prayer conversation with God. Yes, God, let me see my life through the eyes of the 5-year-old version of myself. May I have that part of me that gets offended and gets disappointed in my own actions be reinvigorated. May I learn to cry those tears that is from the ground of sadness and disappointment in my own life, but find that it's also the fertile ground from where your comfort and change comes in my life. And so as you pray, God, show me my life through the eyes of the 5-year-old version of myself. And then find people who love you, people who are close to you, people who want the best for you, and people who love God, people who are not afraid to show you that parts of yourself that may disappoint you, but people who know how to do it in a loving way, people who will hug you as you go through the disappointment of those things, people who would be the arms of God, they would be wrapping their arms around you in compassion and grace and love. And may you, as you develop the eyes of the 5-year-old version of yourself, aspire to become one of those people who mourn, discover that you will also be the one that is comforted by the ultimate comfort.